Në fillim të këtij muaji janë bërë 5 vjet prej se ka hyrë në fuqi marrëveshja Stabilizim Asocimit, marrëveshja kontraktuale ndërmjet Kosovës dhe Bashkimit Evropian, e cila normalizon një bashkëpunim në shumë fusha, përfshirë edhe drejtësinë, ekonominë, por veçanërisht në fokus ka ekonominë. Sa kanë përparuar marrëdhëniet ndërmjet Kosovës dhe BE-s dhe marrëveshja Stabilizim Asocimit përgjatë viteve, sa i kanë ndihmuar ajo bizneseve kosovare. Sonte do të flasim edhe për ku ndodhet marrëdhënia e Kosovës dhe Bashkimit Evropian në përgjithësi, ku jemi me procesin e liberalizimit të vizave, të gjitha këto në një intervistë me shefin e misionit të Bashkimit Evropian në Kosovë, ambasadorin Tomas Szunyog. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Rubikon.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me, and welcome to your viewers.
A pleasure. So you arrived in Kosovo a couple of months ago. So far you were active in many fields. So what is your impression so far? It was quite a dynamic time during all these months, I believe.
Yes, I have arrived in September last year. And of course, the political situation since then was quite dynamic with all developments leading to elections, and after elections, composition of the institutions. But I have been dealing with Kosovo already since 90s, so my actually first visit was 2003. And I remember it took us about 8 hours to drive from Tirana to Jakova at that time. So I can see a lot of developments, I can see a lot of progress, but I also can see a lot of unfinished business and a lot of tasks ahead of Kosovo.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the politics later, but you have been active in also many fields, starting from national football team to women empowerment and marginalized groups. You've been visiting local businesses. So what was the first impression now when you return to Kosovo as chief of mission?
Yes, I think that my general impression is that there is a lot of positive energy in Kosovo. I have been actually surprised by the vitality of the debate, political but also social, activity of a lot of NGOs, a lot of people kind of taking kind of active steps to implement their dreams. So I think that what I see is a really young, ambitious and energetic society. I think that this is a great potential. And the European Union is here to assist this society to develop in the directions leading to European integration, to better quality of life, to better security of citizens and better safety. So I think we are here to assist what is there.
And I mentioned in my introduction that it has been now 5 years since the SAA agreement has been signed and it's in force. So what were the main fields where we achieved progress in this issue?
Well, I think that it's important to say that I see Stabilization Association Agreement in 3 areas. This is a very important document. First of all, it is the first legal relationship between European Union and Kosovo. So this is the basic document which is legally binding and it's also kind of obliging both sides to implement it. But it's also a very important political document because it also created certain bodies like Stabilization Association Council, subcommittees, other fora where European and Kosovo representatives can interact, discuss and exchange opinions about future development. So this is the first part. Second part is, and I think it's also very important, that Stabilization Association Agreements is the first step in European integration. And it also is equalizing the position of Kosovo with other countries in the regions, because again, Stabilization Association process is the first step, followed by candidate status, negotiations, accession negotiations, and entry. So I think this this is the second important thing. And third, Stabilization Association Agreement is also a very practical document, which provides a roadmap for Kosovo how to approximate its legislation, but also rules and standards with European rules and standards with European acquis. So I think that if it is implemented properly, it can actually serve to improve the quality of environment for businesses, for social life, for social protection in all areas of public life in Kosovo. For the implementation, 5 years has been quite a long time. And we understand that sometimes the proper implementation has been hampered by complex political developments, government crisis, elections, and other things. But generally speaking, we are not fully satisfied with the implementation. It is uneven, and we always kind of issue those progress reports every year. And if you read through those progress reports, you would see that we assess Kosovo at being either at early stages or no progress at all. In some cases, there is a good progress on passing legislation, but a specific challenge is implementing actually things. So, we are now kind of celebrating the 5th anniversary. I am certain, and I hope that the next year or after 2 years, we can speak on not only about passing legislation, but also implementing in the practice.
And how much there is to be considered from the local and also the international presence? Because we also had EULEX mission in Kosovo before it was UNMIK. So are only locals responsible for the implementation part and for everything that we see not going well?
Well, I think it is. If you take the period, let's say, since 2008, of course, it is a shared responsibility of everybody involved. But what I would like to underline is that we are expecting Kosovo and Kosovo government to take more and more responsibilities and more activities. So I think that what we need to see is a full local ownership. It must not be perceived as something which is being kind of invented somewhere else or kind of forced on Kosovo society or Kosovo government by force. It is something which needs to come from the Kosovo itself, from the Kosovo society, from the Kosovo government. And I think that, again, we are here to assist, but we cannot do everything on behalf of Kosovo or instead of Kosovo.
Also, the rule of law is in core of SAA agreement. So did you see the respectable progress in the issue of the judiciary on fighting organized crime and corruption and so on? Well, on the rule of law, you are right that this is the key element of the integration strategy of European Union. It is not only important for the rule of law per se, but it is also important for economic development, but also social development, because if there is no efficient judiciary, no efficient police, no efficient prosecutor service, it is also not kind of attractive for foreign investors, but it is not attractive also for the general public here in Kosovo. So I think the rule of law is a cornerstone of development. On this, again, the development is there, and a number of things have been achieved, but we believe it is still not sufficient. And I would like to mention 3 issues. Of course, one is the legal framework. And again, there, development is there. The number of laws were passed. But even though there are successes, there are still some pieces missing. For example, what? For
example, the civil code is still not updated. There is the proposal to reinforce the competencies of the anti-corruption agency. There is, of course, the big issue of declaration and confiscation of assets. Those are the issues where the laws and legal framework is still not finalized. Second issue, which I would mention, is the implementation. We have seen a number of good laws passed and then not implemented. And I think that this is something which needs to be taken more seriously. The integration process is not just ticking the boxes, passing the legislation, passing the strategy. It is really implementation on the ground. And finally, the third thing is that the rule of law system must work as one mechanism with different elements, which of course are independent, again, police, prosecution service, judiciary, but they need to work together as a coherent system because we have been, let's say, monitoring some cases, those kind of high-profile cases. We have seen, for example, from 50 cases, over the period of 5 years, less than 15 completed. Of those 15 cases, again, less than 10 really completed with the sentences, final sentences. And of those 10, less than 10 cases, very few people really kind of sentenced to the prison terms.
Maybe we have good defending teams, good lawyers.
Well, that's one point to look at it. Another point possible is that the system is not really efficient. And we have seen some example of even the statutory period expiring because 10 years of doing things and not succeeding. So,
you think this is being done sometimes intentionally?
Well, I do not have those specific details, but I do see certain cases where the delays are kind of difficult to understand.
Mm-hmm. But you would not go into specific details about these cases?
Not really.
And we have also prepared stories on different aspects of SAA. We're going to see the first one concerning the rule of law, and we're going to return to discuss about it in the studio. Storia për sundimin e ligjit.
Një element kyç I marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit të nënshkruar mes Kosovës dhe BE-s në vitin 2015 është parafrimi I legjislacionit ekzistues të Kosovës me ligjet e Bashkimit Evropian, si dhe zbatimi I këtyre ligjeve. Në fakt, suksesi I marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit varet në masë të madhe nga reformat në drejtësi. Përmes MSA-së synohet fuqizimi I pavarësisë, paanshmërisë dhe llogaridhënies së gjyqësorit në Kosovë. E hatmiftara nga Instituti I Kosovës për drejtësi thotë se marrëveshja e Stabilizim Asocimit në vetvete është histori e suksesi, por se implementimi I kësaj marrëveshje nga institucionet e vendit lë shumë për të dëshiruar.
Kosova fatkeqësisht sot ka ngecë të jashtëzakonshme në fuqra siç është llogaridhënia e sistemit gjyqësor dhe sistemit prokurial, transparenca e tyre, qasjen e drejtësi e ku më së keq I kemi punët si duket në luftën kundër krimit të organizuar, korrupsionit dhe konfiskimit të dobisë pasurore të fituar përmes veprave penale.
Demush Shasha nga Instituti I Kosovës për Politikë Evropiane thotë se lufta kundër krimit të organizuar dhe korrupsionit duhet të jetë prioritet I parë I institucioneve të vendit, pasi ngecjet në të gjitha fushat vijnë si rezultat I problemeve në sistemin e drejtësisë.
Ne nuk gëzojmë liberalizimin I vizave, mbesim vendi vetëm izoluar në rajon pa drejt udhëtimit në zonën Schengen, vetëm dhe vetëm. Për shkak se disa vende anëtare, siç është Franca, nuk janë dakord se Kosova ka bërë progres në kuadër luftës kundër korrupsionit nivelit të lartë. Pra gjë e parë dhe më e rëndësishme është sundimi I ligjit.
E hatmiftara nga IKD thotë se Kosova nuk qëndron keq në parafrimin e legjislacionit ekzistues me ligjet e BE-s, por se implementimi këtyre ligjeve është në fazën fillestare, si rezultat I mungesës së vullnetit politik.
Kosova I ka humbur deri më tani 5 vjet dhe jemi ende përsëris në fazën fillestare. Në këtë drejtim, unë besoj që qytetari I Kosovës, ekonomia e Kosovës kërkon që Kosova të shpejtoj në rrugën drejt integrimit evropian, sa më shpejt që futemi në familjen e Bashkimit Evropian, sigurisht që mirëqenia e qytetarëve, mundësitë e qytetarëve të Kosovës në fushat të ndryshme do të jenë shumë të avancuara, shumë më të mira.
Në raportin e vitit 2020 të Komisionit Evropian për Kosovën, thuhet se sistemi gjyqësor i Kosovës është në një fazë të hershme të përgatitjes dhe sa administrimi i drejtësisë mbetet i ngadalt dhe jo efikas.
We have seen the story on the rule of law, and also you mentioned proactive investigations, prosecutions, final convictions, also confiscation of criminal assets. So, and on the other hand, we have a new government and new institutions in Kosovo in place. So what are the expectations of the new government on helping to achieve all this?
Well, our expectations from this new government is actually that it would finally be the first government to last the whole mandate. I think that this would be
minimalistic approach first.
No, because and we are kind of encouraged by the strong kind of majority the government has, the strong majority also with which it was voted in the parliament.
So and this can be used in a good way and also in negative aspect.
Yes, but again, I have arrived only last year, but my understanding is that the Kosovo has had systematic issues with the longevity of the governments, and therefore the average kind of time of government in power is 2 years. But I think that we really need to focus on those strategic and long-term issues, and for that we need a partner which is there for some time and can not only plan for certain issues but also can implement it, but also the government which is supported by the majority in the parliament so that it is able to pass necessary legislation. And I think this is again encouraging. We are ready to work with the new government. We believe that the priorities, as we have not seen the government program yet, but the priorities as they were defined are right one. Certainly the development of and reforms of the rule of law sector, economic development, social issues, development of education, those are all right priorities. Of course, we also expect this government to engage seriously on the issue of European integration, on the issue of regional cooperation, and obviously on the issue of dialogue.
You have seen the names of the ministers. Are you optimistic about what we've seen so far?
Well, I am planning to meet the ministers in the coming days. Again, this would be the first meeting with them, and I met actually already with the Prime Minister and 2 Deputy Prime Ministers, and I'm encouraged. So again, it is coming in coming days, but so far I have no reason to doubt that this will be the functioning government which can work with us on European integration issues.
How did you see the issue that was really discussed in Kosovo, especially last Friday, to have a new law on elections before the voting of the new president? The opposition called it very problematic and was strongly against it.
Well, on the reform of elections legislation, we have been very clear. We have sent as European Union a full-fledged mission for observation mission for election in 2017. 2019. Unfortunately, we were not able, due to COVID-19 restrictions, to send a full mission to observe the elections now in February, but all those missions have been consistent in declaring that Kosovo needs a serious reform of election legislation, which relates not only to one specific topic, but it needs to be comprehensive reforms on the voters lists, on the ways how the elections are organized outside of the country, on number of other issues, so we are for serious and comprehensive election legislation reform. But we also believe this needs to be discussed seriously and discussed also with the opposition. So our proposal, and I mentioned it also to the Speaker of the Parliament, and I have been mentioning it to all the parliamentary groups even before elections, that our proposal is to establish that ad hoc committee in the Parliament for election legislation reform and work on those reforms in line with the recommendation of the EU, but also other international actors, OSCE and others, and then to have a package which will be kind of supported strongly by the Parliament.
You're talking about the process that will need some time, some consultation. It cannot be done in a day.
Yes, exactly. So from that perspective, we believe that focusing on one specific topic and trying to really do it very quickly was not the ideal way how the election reform should be done.
And also on the economic side, the key goal of SAA is also to enhance Kosovo's position in international trade. Have we seen progress in this field so far in these last 5 years?
Well, I think that if you look at the statistics, the progress is there. The export of Kosovo has increased by 80%, while import by 40%. So I think that this is the SAA is clearly contributing to narrowing this gap between export and import. I think it is contributing to improving the payment balance of Kosovo, but also I think, which is more important even, is creating new framework in which Kosovo companies, but also international companies are working, and therefore it is contributing to the safety of and satisfaction of consumers. I think that this is the most important part of it. So yes, it is certainly beneficial to most of the Kosovo companies.
And we will stay in this economic part, but first we're going to see another story dealing with the economy. Ta shohim storjen e dy që ka të bëjë me ekonominë.
Me 27 tetor të vitit 2015, Kosova nënshkroi marrëveshjen e parë kontraktuale me Bashkimin Evropian, e cila përfshin të gjitha fushat e qeverisjes. Për te rëndësisë politike, në thelb të Marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit, qëndrojnë aspektet ekonomike, të cilat përbëjnë qëllimin kryesor të marrëveshjes. MSA përmban elementet bazë të tregut të përbashkët Evropian për tregti të lirë. Përmes Marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit, synohet që Kosova dhe Bashkimi Evropian të themelojnë një zonë të tregtisë së lirë, duke i larguar gradualisht tarifat dhe barierat doganore. Berat Rukiqi nga Oda Ekonomike e Kosovës thot se krahasuar me periudhën e parahyrjes në fuqi të MSA-së, disa kategori të produkteve e kanë dyfishuar eksportin në tregun e Bashkimit Evropian.
Nëse krahasojmë eksportet tashme para 5 vite, kemi deri në disa kategori të produkteve deri në 50% rritje të eksporteve. Nuk mund të themi që është ekskluzivisht si rezultat i marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit, po sigurisht mundësia që të eksportohet në tregun e Bashkimit Evropian pa kufizime, që në kupton pa tarifa doganore, apo instrumente tjera tarifore të cilat do të ishin pastaj me koste më të lartë për prodhuesit tonë, e kanë ndihmuar këtë rritje të eksporteve drejt Bashkimit Evropian.
Rukiqi megjithatë thot se bllokada që u bëhet produkteve me origjinë shtazore e zbeh impaktin ekonomik të marrëveshjes.
Po të ishte ndryshe, pra po të lejoj edhe kjo kategori të eksportohej në vendet e BE-s apo në tregun e përbashkët të Bashkimit Evropian, atë përfitimet nga kjo marrëveshje do të ishin shumë më të mëdha.
Emru Shujkani nga Këshilli Evropian i Investitorëve thot se zbatimi plot i MSA-së do të kishte efekte jashtëzakonisht të mëdha në ekonominë e vendit dhe tërheqjen e investimeve të huaja. Ai shton se prodhuesit vendor ende nuk po i gëzojnë sa duhet përfitimet ekonomike që dalin nga MSA dhe kjo kryesisht si rezultati mungesës së stabilitetit politik në vend.
dhe duhet punohet ende për ta sjellë në nivel konkurrues me në rend të parë me vendet e rajonit për cilën diçka më tepër, do të thotë nuk ka arritë të merr beneficionet ose të arrijë beneficionet e kësaj marrëveshje ende.
Ujkani shton se krahas ngecjes së institucioneve të Kosovës në zbatimin e reformave të parapara në MSA, mos liberalizimi i vizave është një barierë shtesë për prodhuesit vendor.
Baza e MSA-së ndërtohet mbi këto 4 liri themelore: liria e lëvizjes së madrave, e personave, ofrimit të shërbimeve dhe qarkullimit të kapitalit. Prandaj ju lutem për të 4 liri ose të 4 liri që të jenë të materializuara në praktik. Është domosdoshme që i zoti i tyre të ketë mundësinë për të lëvizur lirshëm.
Sipas Agjencisë së Statistikave të Kosovës, eksportet e Kosovës me vendet e BE-s në shkurt të vitit 2021 arritën në 16.7 milion euro, ose rreth 34.6% e eksporteve të përgjithshme. Ndërsa partnerët kryesor për eksportin e mallrave në BE janë Italia, Gjermania dhe Holanda.
Mr. Ambassador, we have seen also in this story that there is a maximum 10 years from when Kosovo and EU must have a bilateral free trade area. So far, we have seen 5 years passing. So are you optimistic that we are going to see this aim being achieved in the next 5 years?
Yes, I think that actually in the agreement you can see certain deadlines. Those deadlines are actually coming. With the new government, we have discussed it already, and I am optimistic that we can complete what is there. I would like to make one comment on those agriculture products, because this is something which is quite important and quite sensitive for the European Union. Not only because the agriculture is a special kind of area of economic activities, which is quite important for some member states, but also because it is it is key to have a really consumer safety. And there, some of the restrictions or some of the limits for Kosovo products exports are actually caused by the system of Kosovo veterinary and phytosanitary controls, which is still not aligned with the EU standards. And this is something which we have been trying to discuss with the Kosovo government for years already, and it is still not implemented.
Why do you think that is still not implemented?
Well, it's specifically about the issue of veterinary inspectors and how the system of veterinary inspection is organized, because for the time being the veterinary inspectors are actually working as a part of municipality services, which is not acceptable for European Union, where we need to see this as a part of the central government. So there are issues which we are discussing already for so months and years.
And what can change if it goes from the local level to central government?
Because then there will be one body which will be responsible.
You will not need to talk with different municipalities.
Not only the need, but we need to see that the products, and frankly, we do not have a problem with the quality of the Kosovo agriculture products. It's more about the quality of system which guarantees the quality, and there the system is simply not aligned, so that's causing some issues, particularly for agriculture products.
But also the products with animal origin are not being accepted in the EU market. It's the same issue?
Yes, it is the same issue. Basically, we need to see the centralized, a very strong system which will guarantee the quality of those products, and then that would facilitate the export to the EU markets.
Basically, you're saying this is the only obstacle to have centralized inspection?
Well, it is a system which needs to be recognized as the one which can issue the quality certificates. But yes, this is one important step which have been missing for years.
And the pressure should be imposed to the government?
Yes.
And also, as we've seen 2 stories so far, but in each of them, the main issue that is being mentioned is the lack of visa liberalization. So also, I believe this is the main issue that people of Kosovo want to discuss with you as the main EU representative. So this also harms the environment for doing business, trade with the European market, because we are not at the same level of freedom of movement of goods and also of the people.
Yes, I understand that this is a very important issue for everybody, and not only here in TV studio, but also on the streets, but also in government offices. And on that, again, it's an issue which I understand very well. I also am coming from a country which has some serious restrictions on travels before 1990, so I understand it as a person very well. But at the same time, there are certain procedures in the European Union. The process started already more than 10 years ago. It went for a relatively long period of time because of some internal issues here. But it was concluded from the perspective of EU institutions in 2018 by European Commission's assessment that Kosovo is meeting all the criteria. However, the decision-making body in this case is the Council of European Union, which means basically the meeting of European Union member states ministers. So you need to persuade 27 ministers to agree on that.
Which is sometimes really frustrating, because you have been given a criteria, the list with 95 criteria. You fulfill all of them. The European Commission said, okay, you've done your job, and then we see other complications.
Well, this is, again, the decision-making is made by the Council of Ministers, and some member states are not persuaded still. So my advice, and this is the advice to you as well as to any minister or prime minister or president I'm meeting, is that there need to be more active engagement with 27 member states, because they are making the decision.
What is there to be done more?
I think that there are two issues which are being debated when this issue is debated. One, of course, is the migration-related issues. And I have seen the data which suggest a significant progress, but there are still some issues. There is a significant number of people leaving Kosovo every year.
And some of them are actually other countries of the region sometimes.
And some of them are applying to asylum, for example, in some member states. Of course, the numbers are, again, significantly lower than, let's say, 3-4 years ago, but it is still there. And there are some other issues related to migration management and for people from Kosovo, but also from migrants coming from third countries. The second issue, again, we are back to square one, is the rule of law issues and fight against organized crime, corruption. So I think that, again, my impression is that there need to be better and stronger and more frequent engagement with member states. Of course, now with the COVID-19 restrictions, it's more difficult to travel. But I still believe there are ways how to approach the ministers of justice, ministers of interiors, police experts, other people who are dealing with those issues with all 27 member states. I think that it is sometimes discussed here in public sphere, some 1, 2, 3, 4 countries. I think it's really important to persuade all 27. And I think you have the...
Even though, as you mentioned, those two issues also have been tackled through those 95 criteria, and were ticked in the end.
Yes, but you know, this is not something you tick and forget about it. It needs to be...
But also, when you join the EU, you need not only to tick, but it needs to be a continuous progress.
So there need to be a consistent effort. And again, I believe that Kosovo has results, and Kosovo has some arguments. Again, some figures goes down, there are some issues. Of course, there always can be improved, and they can be always better. But I think what is missing is this, again, understanding that this is member states, not me, not institutions, not representative of those institutions. It's simply decided by the member states, and you need to work more and better and more actively with the member states. I do believe that Kosovo has a significant network of embassies in almost all member states. I think it can be used more to promote Kosovo as a safe, secure country with its fighting.
So our ambassadors should work more.
Sure. They should be, but they should be also provided with some data, figures, statistics, other things. So they should be provided with good arguments, which I believe there are there. And they should go, and by the way, I think that they should be meeting more those ministers of interior than the ministers of foreign affairs, probably. Because this is something which is important, and it is important for all the countries of the region, is basically to persuade those countries, the member states, that this is something which is worth doing.
And sometimes also here, it's an analysis that this can lead to distrust towards EU institutions, because first you have EU setting certain criteria, then having Kosovo institutions fulfilling those, but in the end the same EU comes to you and say, okay, but it's up to different states and countries to decide. So why then collaborate with EU missions and not only to have bilateral agreements or relations with certain EU countries?
On that, I would say that the EU is very complex mechanisms with very different and complicated decision-making mechanisms. So in some cases, it is something which, for example, on trade, it is simply the common understanding, and the Commission is leading this process and negotiating foreign trade agreements. On some issues, like foreign policy issues, it's exclusive competence of member states. On some issues, there are shared competencies. So, and this is part of that is justice and home affairs. It is basically shared competencies. So I think there need to be a kind of better understanding of how European Union works. And on this specific issue, it's again the Council of Ministers, which means it is usually the Council which is having rotating presidency. So it's important to talk with the country presiding European Union, which is now Portugal. In the second half of this year, it will be Slovenia. And it is then important to really prepare those 27 ministers with good arguments why Kosovo should be granted visa liberalization. So I think that, again, it is an issue which is sensitive, which is important, and I can understand that. But we need to work together, the EU institution, Kosovo, member states, to achieve it.
And also the European Green Deal is a priority for European Commission, and we're going to talk about where Kosovo is standing with this challenge, but first also we're going to see a story we prepared for it. Ta shohim historien lidhur me mjedisin.
Neni 115 i Marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit të nënshkruar nga Kosova dhe Bashkimi Evropian i dedikohet mjedisit. Në këtë nen, palët pajtuan të zhvillojnë dhe forcojnë bashkëpunimin në fushën e mjedisit, me fokus të veçantë në parandalimin e degradimit mjedisor dhe përmirësimit të cilësisë së ujit dhe ajrit. Profesori i edukimit mjedisor në Universitetin e Prishtinës, Zyrës, thotë se Kosova ka bërë progres në harmonizimin e legjislacionit të vendit me ligjet e Bashkimit Evropian, por se këto ligje nuk janë duke u zbatuar në nivelin e duhur.
Ajo që ka është vendosur në dispozitat ligjore është larg prej asaj që po zbatohet në praktikë. Dhe sigurisht kjo është këputje mes asaj që ka ekziston në legjislacion dhe asaj që ka zbatohet në praktikë ka bërë që situata mjedisit të jetë mjaft e rënduar.
Antarësimi i Kosovës në konventa siç është ajo e Parisit për ndryshime klimatike, sipas ekologës Egzona Shala, do të kishte pasur një ndikim shumë të rëndësishëm në sanksionimin e ndotsve, por edhe në jetësimin e marrëveshjes së Stabilizim Asocimit.
Kish me lehtësu punën e çdo qytetarit në aspektin se në raste për shembull nuk ka ku ankohet qoftë për rastet e hidrocentraleve, përmeni si shembull ose qoftë për ndotjen e mjedisit, sigurisht kishim qenë pjesë e konventave të ndryshme, atëherë sanksionimet edhe ana ligjore për shtetin tonë kish me qenë me një masë më të kontrolluar.
Për profesorin Veselaj, ndryshime duhet të bëhen edhe në Kushtetutën e Kosovës, e cila ka mangësi, pasi nuk u garanton qytetarëve të vendit të drejtën e mjedisit të shëndetshëm.
Një përmirësim, respektivisht një amandamentim i Kushtetutës që do të na kthente përgjegjësinë në të drejtë, do të thotë se shteti e ka për detyrë të garantojë qytetarit të drejtën për të pasur një mjedis të shëndetshëm, do të ishte burim që edhe ligjet që janë aplikuar të mirëshin më seriozisht nga përzbatim nga në radhë parë inspektorati mjedisor dhe në radhë të dytë nga gjykata.
Duke folur për rolin e BE-s në përmirësimin e gjendjes së mjedisit në Kosovë, ekologja Egzona Shala thotë se Bashkimi Evropian përmes investimeve në projekte të ndryshme ka ndikim të rëndësishëm, por se situata me mjedisin vazhdon të mos jetë e mirë.
Realisht Bashkimi Evropian është një ndër donatorët më të mëdhaj për mjedisin në fusha të ndryshme edhe në aspekte të ndryshme, qoftë në atë të edukimit edhe qoftë në atë të përmirësimit të gjendjes.
Shala e Veselaj thonë se cilësia e ajrit, ujit dhe degradimi i natyrës duhet të trajtohen me prioritet nga institucionet e vendit.
So, Mr. Ambassador, as mentioned also in this story, the EU was focused on the environment issues, helping Kosovo with donations and other aspects. So, are we fulfilling the standards, European standards on environment?
Well, you can go out and smell the air, and I think that the answer will be clear. I think that one needs to understand that this is not just assisting Kosovo with the current structure to kind of be better on environment protection. I think that what we are trying to achieve with the Green Deal, and again, it's not only the European Commission, but it's also strongly supported by all the member states, is to really transform the economy, but also society, to a completely new model of development, which will be sustainable, will be green, and will be healthy. So I think that it is not just a kind of improvement of certain pieces, it's just a transformation of the whole system. And for that, I would say that there are two two groups. One is those big macroeconomic issues. Here it is clear that Kosovo needs to get out of the coal production and energy production by coal. That's very clear. Because without that, it's not possible. And again, it's also would not be financially sustainable because no international donors today is ready to support any coal production or electricity production.
Even though there are studies that Kosovo is basically sleeping on the coal.
Yes, but this is gone, basically, I think. In this current model. So this is first thing. And again, there are alternatives which are there. One example is gas, to use gas instead of coal. But I think that what is even more necessary is to develop a strategy which would also support alternative sources. I mean, there is a lot of sun here. Not today, but generally. You can use also wind. You can focus on energy saving, which is actually the best way, which is to make the buildings and basically generally the structure less energy.
All these we are seeing that are being done, but you think that it should be done more?
It should be done more, and should be done more coherently and more strategically. It is still not there, I believe, on this big macroeconomic level. It is also necessary to develop a system of waste management. We are assisting, of course. We are discussing the waste management systems for the big cities here. We are developing also waste management sites, the whole systems, donating trucks and other things to the whole systems, and this is done by EU, but also by important member states. But also, I think there need to be recycling of this waste and other measures, not to really put everything on the waste sites and dump everything somewhere. But I would also argue that apart from those big strategic issues, and I certainly hope that the new government will be really green in this sense. But I think there need to be also a more kind of those individual responsibilities for how you behave and what you put to the waste bin and what you throw somewhere away. Because frankly speaking, when you walk around, you see a lot of opportunities for development, a lot of opportunities for improvement. For example, when I shop, I'm always kind of surprised when I kind of want to put my kind of goods into my kind of textile kind of bag, but everybody is offering me those plastic bags instead. I mean, this is something which is not right. It needs to start with those big issues, but there need to be a change of mind of every Kosovars on that issue.
And also we touched upon political environment in Kosovo. I propose to watch another story that we prepared and talk about this issue ongoing. Të shohim historien lidhur me çështjet që kanë të bëjnë me politikën, që po ashtu është një ndër standardet e marrëveshjes së stabilizim asocimit.
Marrëveshja e Stabilizim Asocimit e nënshkruar në vitin 2015 mes Kosovës dhe Bashkimit Evropian, përtej rëndësisë së saj ekonomike, ka një rëndësi të jashtëzakonshme politike për vendin. Kjo pasi përmes kornizës ligjore për parafrim dhe zbatim të legjislacionit të BE-s, marrëveshja shënon hapin e parë drejt integrimit në Bashkimin Evropian. Marrëveshjet e Stabilizim Asocimit në të kaluarën kanë shërbyer si bazë për procesin integrues të shumë shteteve. Për demonstrashën nga Instituti i Kosovës për Politika Evropiane, nënshkrimi i kësaj marrëveshje kontraktuale paraqet fillimin e procesit integrues të Kosovës.
Marrëveshja në vetvete është jashtëzakonisht e rëndësishme sepse paraqet themelet e procesit ton integrues. Pra në kuptimin politik kanë ngritur raportet zyrtare mes BE-s dhe Kosovës dhe si e tillë është vetëm marrëveshje ndërkombëtare që ne do të nënshkruajmë me Bashkimin Evropian deri në ditën e antarësimit. Pra si e tillë ajo do të rregullon gjitha marrëdhëniet tona me Bashkimin Evropian për 20-30 vite të tashme.
Butrend Berisha nga Instituti i Prishtinës për Studime Politike thotë se nënshkrimi i kësaj marrëveshje mes Kosovës dhe Bashkimit Evropian, pavarësisht 5 vendeve anëtare mosnjohëse, është dëshmi që Kosova mund të bëjë progres në rrugën e saj integruese edhe në rast të mosnjohjes nga këto 5 shtete.
Mendoj që nënshkrimi i marrëveshjes Stabilizim Asocimit ka rëndësi edhe në planin politik për Kosovën, duke qenë se është një dëshmi që Kosova mund të përparojë në rrugën drejt BE-s, pra nëse ka vullnet në Bruksel, mund të gjenden modalitetet e duhura që Kosovës të mundësohet të avancojë në rrugën e saj integruese, që mendoj është një gjë shumë e rëndësishme, pra kemi një marrëveshje kontraktuale të nënshkruar ndërmjet Kosovës dhe Bashkimit Evropian.
Por pavarësisht rëndësisë politike të kësaj marrëveshje, progresi drejt përmbushjes së obligimeve për të cilat është Kosova, po konsiderohet i ngadalshëm.
Ritmi i zbatimit nga ana institucioneve kosovare ka qenë i ngadalshëm. Kjo mendoj që është ndikuar shumë nga krizat e vazhdueshme politike, mungesa e stabilitetit domethënë politik, zgjedhjet e shpeshta si edhe polarizimi i skajshëm ndërmjet qeverisë edhe opozitës në faza të ndryshme. Pra në vitet e fundit Kosova ka mundur që të zbatojë më shumë dispozita të MSA-së në legjislacion, të përmirësoj më shumë kuadrin institucional që të ofrojë shërbime më të mira për qytetarët edhe biznesit.
Fatkeqësisht nuk është arritur shumë. Marrëveshja Stabilizim Asocimit dhe reformat që ajo ka para pa nuk janë zbatuar në një shkallë të durë ose ideale. Vitin që lan pas, vitin 2020, ishte viti i cili mbriti rekord më të ri më të ulët zbatimit marrëveshjes Stabilizim Asocimi, ku sipas raporteve të vetë institucioneve, niveli i zbatimit ka rënë nga 51, sa ishte vitin e kaluar, në 42%, pra gjysma e obligimeve që vetë qeveria ka para pa, nuk janë zbatuar.
Këta dy njohës të politikave europiane thonë se qeveria e re e Kosovës duhet ta ketë prioritet zbatimin e kësaj marrëveshje me qëllim përmirësimin e jetës së qytetarëve dhe avancimin në rrugën e saj drejt antarësimit në Bashkimin Evropian.
Mr. Ambassador, we've seen in this story, one of the experts said that the fulfillment of the obligations went down from 51% to 42% in the last year. So what is there that needs to be done to raise the bar again?
Well, again, this is something we are coming back to, this issue of political stability of Kosovo. I think what we need is the government which is stable and can focus on the long-term and consistent development. And we also need a parliament which can pass the legislation. This was the main challenge because in the last 2 years the government was focused on ad hoc issues, on survival basically, and we also, unfortunately, in the last period, we have seen the government which was not even able to pass necessary legislation in the parliament. So I think we need the stability, and we need the government with a solid parliamentary majority. But we also need, and this is what actually we are now working on, the guiding kind of instrument which would kind of set the right priorities. It's called the European Agenda, Reform Agenda. We agreed actually last year, together with previous government, that we would launch it now. We are now in the process of finalizing this so-called ERA 2, because there was ERA 1 before. We are hoping that the new government can finalize this very important document soon, actually this month. And then this document should set very clear kind of what are those priorities, what needs to be implemented now, what in 6 months, what in 12 months. So we are hopeful that this would be done, and then we can start kind of real kind of implementation of those issues which we set in the ERA 2. We are now preparing this year progress report, which again would be a challenge because what exactly we should kind of measure for as compared with the last October. So there needs to be a really strong focus and very quick start of implementing the ERA 2 and therefore Stabilization Association Agreement. And again, those measurements which were mentioned, those 50 and 40, those are actually measurements which were introduced by the Kosovo government itself. And even the Kosovo government is admitting that it is implementing only 40% of their own kind of measures. If we kind of look at how we see it, it probably would be even less. So let's really start doing that seriously.
And this new government, Kurti's government, doesn't have a ministry for European integration. Do you see this as problematic?
Well, we are not the one to advise the government how to structure exactly the European integration agenda. And if you look around in countries of the region, some of them have ministry, some of them actually deal with this issue within the system of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Some of them have a system within the Prime Minister's office. So we do not really have an exact model what is the best. What we are expecting from the government, of any government in the region, is two things. There need to be a solid let's say technical expertise. So there needs to be a team of people who understands what they are doing. and they know, let's say, EU legislation, EU acquis, Stabilization Association Agreement, those kind of technical, let's say, technical experts. But second thing, we need to see a strong local ownership and strong political leadership on implementation of those issues, because at the end of the day, you can come to the point where actually you need to really, let's say, settle conflicts between 2 or 3 different ministries, or to order different line ministries, whether this is a priority number 1 or priority number 10. And for that, we really need a very strong political leadership. We are now seeing a model already for the second time where there is a deputy prime minister for European integration, and we expect this to work and provide those 2 things which I just mentioned. But there need to be a really strong political leadership on the side of the government. We are not here to force on the Kosovo government what it should do.
And EU experts locally and also internationally are divided within 2 groups. The first that say, okay, if Kosovo has signed an SAA agreement with EU, then there can be a way to continue with the progress towards integration into EU. And the others, there are skeptics that say this is the only agreement that could be signed because of the lack of recognition from 5 EU states. So do you believe, as a head of mission of EU in Kosovo, that there can be a progress to have Kosovo join EU without first having these 5 recognitions? Well,
there is this commitment, which is a very strong one, and came from the actually summit meeting in Thessaloniki in 2003, which is very clear. And it says the future of the whole Western Balkans is in the European Union.
This is very abstract in the end.
Well,
because Kosovo is in different level because of the issue of non-recognized.
This is there and it stands. So this commitment is there, and I really am confident that Kosovo can be integrated into European Union as a part of Western Balkan region. But on this, let me be very clear. I mean, the road to European Union for Kosovo leads, as well as for Serbia, leads through dialogue. When dialogue is successful, that would open doors to European integration and to further steps on the way.
Which means Kosovo and Serbia needs to reach an agreement to recognize one another and then to have a clear path towards EU. And the same applies for Kosovo and for Serbia.
Pristina and Belgrade needs to reach a comprehensive, legally binding agreement which would solve all the open issues to progress on the way to European Union. That's.
And also we have prepared the story to see where we are standing with the issue of the dialogue. Ta shohim storjen lidhur me dialogun.
Dialogut mes Kosovës dhe Serbisë kushtohet një rëndësi e veçantë në marrëveshjen e Stabilizim Asocimit të nënshkruar mes Kosovës dhe Bashkimit Evropian në vitin 2015. Me nënshkrimin e kësaj marrëveshje, e cila hyri në fuqi me 1 prill të 2016, Kosova mori obligim ligjor vazhdimin e dialogut me Serbinë. Marrëveshja e Stabilizim Asocimit siguron që të dyja vendet ta vazhdojnë rrugën e tyre drejt integrimit, duke e shmangur bllokimin e palës tjetër. Në këtë marrëveshje thuhet se përpjekjet për normalizim të marrëdhënieve, rezultat final duhet ta kenë një marrëveshje gjithëpërfshirëse ligjërisht të detyrueshme mes Kosovës dhe Serbisë. Bekim Çollaku, i cili në cilësinë e ministrit të integrimeve europiane e nënshkroi marrëveshjen e Stabilizim Asocimit në vitin 2015, thotë se MSA është e arritura më e madhe e Kosovës në rrugën e saj drejt integrimit në Bashkimin Evropian. Ai thekson se kjo marrëveshje krahas impaktit të saj politik dhe ekonomik ka një rol shumë të rëndësishëm në normalizimin e marrëdhënieve mes Kosovës dhe Serbisë.
kjo marrëveshje vetëm sa e fuqizon dhe e bën më të domosdoshëm procesin e vazhdimit të dialogut për normalizimin e marrëdhënieve ndërmjet Kosovës dhe Serbisë dhe i jep atë peshën e domosdoshme politike, sepse është edhe kriter për brenda kësaj marrëveshje.
Për arbër fetahun nga grupi për studime juridike dhe politike, përfshirja e Kosovës në një marrëveshje ligjërisht obliguese për vazhdimin e dialogut me Serbinë është një sukses në vete.
Vetë zotimi i Kosovës për të qenë pjesë e dialogut me Serbinë është një zotim që është bërë bëjës, kësaj MSA-ja ka qenë një presion shtesë apo një shtytje shtesë për të qëndruar në dialog, marrë parasysh edhe ato klauzola që mund të ketë pasoja politike në mes të marrëdhënies kontraktuale të BE-s dhe Kosovës, besoj që kjo është ndikimi kryesor që është bërë nga MSA-ja në dialogun politik në mes të Kosovës dhe Serbisë.
Duke folur për progresin e procesin e dialogut mes Kosovës dhe Serbisë që nga nënshkrimi i MSA-së, Fetahu thot se ka pasur ngecje në këtë drejtim dhe kjo si rezultat i përfshirjes së shumë akterëve në këtë proces, si dhe zhvillimeve politike në vend e rajon.
Nuk ka pasur shumë ndikim në dinamikat e dialogut. Kjo për arsye se procesi i dialogut me Serbinë ka qenë një proces më kompleks, një proces i cili ka pasur involvim të shumë aktorëve, edhe që dinamikat e tij janë përcaktuar shpesh herë nga ngjarje të ndryshme politike, edhe zhvillime gjeopolitike, por gjithsesi as dinamikat e dialogut nuk kanë ndikuar në zbatimin e MSA-s, e kemi pasur pak a shumë një lloj marrëdhënie si në heshtje ku këto dy dinamika nuk e kanë ndikuar njëra tjetrën në substancë.
Ish-ministri i integrimeve Bekim Çollaku thotë se është e domosdoshme që institucionet e Kosovës të fokusohen në përmbushjen e të gjitha obligimeve që rrjedhin nga MSA, duke përfshirë normalizimin e marrëdhënieve me Serbinë me qëllim që t'i hapet rrugë integrimit në Bashkimin Evropian.
Bashkimi Evropian e ka bërë të qartë se kusht primar për një antarësim eventual në Bashkimin Evropian, qoftë për Kosovën, qoftë për Serbinë, është arritja e kësaj marrëveshje përfundimtare, domethënë normalizimi i plot i marrëdhënieve ndërmjet dy shteteve. Mendoj që institucionet aktuale duhet përsëri të rifokusohen në përmbushjen e obligimeve që kanë dalë nga kjo marrëveshje, sepse vetëm përmbushja e tyre jep pasaj dëshmi të mjaftueshme për Kosovën kundrejt Bashkimit Evropian, që Kosova është e gatshme për hapjen e radhës.
Kujtojmë që dialogu me Serbinë u pezullua në nëntor të vitit 2018 për shkak të vendosjes së taksës 100% ndaj mallrave të importuara nga Serbia dhe Bosnia-Hercegovina. Taksa u hoq më pas, sikurse edhe masat e reciprocitetit të vendosura nga qeveria pasuese dhe dialogu rifilloi në korrekt të vitit 2020. Gjatë 10 viteve të dialogut Kosovë-Serbi, besohet se janë arritur mbi 30 marrëveshje, ndonse autoritetet e këtyre dy vendeve flasin me shifra të ndryshme për këto marrëveshje.
The EU facilitated dialogue has been quite a rocky road. As mentioned in the last part of this story, the Kosovo and Serbia cannot agree even on the issue of how many agreements have been achieved. So it started with the mediation of Mr. Robert Cooper, then we had 3 high representatives of EU mediating the dialogue, and it's been more than 10 years, actually 10 years and 1 month. So far, we are not seeing the end of it. What's your assessment?
Well, I would like to underline that this is the process which is owned by Belgrade and Pristina. So it depends on the two sides how to negotiate, what to negotiate, and how quickly to negotiate. We, as European Union, are only facilitating this dialogue, and we believe that we can actually succeed relatively quickly with achieving this comprehensive agreement, legally binding, which would solve all the open issues. It only depends.
What to understand when you say really quickly?
Again, it depends on the two sides. It can be done within months. It's certainly not the issue of 10 years. But it also depends on the readiness and willingness and preparedness of the two sides.
Are we seeing the willingness of the two sides to achieve? When you say within months, it means up to the end of this year.
Well, it is I understand that it is rather sensitive issues on both sides, and it is sometimes kind of complicated by issues like elections and change of governments and other issues. But again, in the framework we have now, it is something which can be achieved within months, if the two sides are really ready to sit together and seriously negotiate.
But so far we have seen Prime Minister Kurti saying that is not, the dialogue is not among his first priorities. He mentioned before becoming the Prime Minister during the election campaign, it is the 8th priority for him and his political party, and now he put it like mentioning it might be the 4th priority.
Well, so there is a positive development. No, seriously, I think that, again, you cannot, or let me put it this way. We believe that the priorities as they are defined by election campaign and now Prime Minister Kurti are the right priorities. As I mentioned, rule of law issues, economic development, COVID-19 pandemics, social development, reform of education, those are all correct and right priorities, and they are priorities which we are ready to support. But at the same time, I do not believe that you can focus only on one priority and not on others. You need to do several things in the parallel to be successful. And again, dialogue is important, not only for political development of Kosovo, but also for all other issues. It's dealing with a very human issues like issue of missing persons. It is dealing with a very economic issues like the common trade, and it's also dealing with a number of practical issues. So I think that it is in the mutual interest of both sides to sit together and negotiate seriously with the goal of reaching this agreement.
And when do you believe we will see the first meeting taking place between Prime Minister Kurti and the representatives of Belgrade?
Well, we are hoping that this can happen quite soon. There is an official invitation for Prime Minister Kurti to visit Brussels bilaterally, and we are hoping that the visit will happen and that Prime Minister will come and discuss also how to proceed with the dialogue. And we believe again that it would not be something which would be postponed or delayed. I think that there is no time to waste.
When do you expect this meeting to take place?
You mean bilateral or?
Yes, bilateral.
Yeah, I think that, again, we are hoping for coming weeks.
In coming weeks.
And then we will, again, hear more precisely how to proceed with the dialogue. But we certainly believe that sooner better.
And you are optimistic that an agreement could be reached if two sides want it within this year?
I am optimistic that the agreement can be reached. Let's put it this way.
You don't want to put an end date?
No. I mean, the European Union is usually not in the business of giving dates. But again, it depends.
We learned that in the hard way with visa liberalization.
Yes. No, it depends on the will of the two sides. I think that we do have a good process. And if both sides are willing, it can get us to the success of the dialogue. And this success of the dialogue, as I said, would open doors to further EU integration for Kosovo, but also for Serbia.
And also, Mr. Ambassador, I wanted to discuss with you the hottest issue of the moment, not only for Kosovo, but for the whole world, the issue with the pandemic, COVID-19. So Kosovo got the first contingent of vaccines, 24,000, coming from the COVAX deal. So can Kosovo expect more help on the issue of vaccines from European Union?
Well, first of all, I would like to underline one important issue, that even though the vaccination process has started, also in Kosovo, and I'm really pleased to see it, we should not underestimate the preventive measures. I think that it's important that the government decided on tightening some of those measures, and this is something which we fully support, because even if we can see it in the European countries, that even with the vaccination ongoing, the number of cases are actually increasing. So it's important to keep preventive measures. On the vaccines, we really are grateful that also with the assistance of EU, but also other donors, the UN-led COVAX delivered the first batch. My understanding is that the first part, which is about 100,000, was divided to two deliveries, but the second deliveries, delivering the rest to 100,000, should be coming within weeks again. At the same time, European Union also kind of offered 70 million euro for delivering vaccines through the other mechanisms, either through European Commission negotiating with the producers or through donation from the member states. We are optimistic that, again, in coming weeks, we can see the first deliveries of those vaccines to Kosovo. And also there are other mechanisms developing, which I am fairly confident that we can reach or even be faster than the goal or ambition of the government, which is to have 70% of vaccinated Kosovars within 12 months. I think we can actually achieve it even faster. I would also mention that European Union is not only looking into the vaccine deliveries, but also ready to assist Kosovo financially and with materials, because we believe it's equally important also to look into negative consequences of COVID-19 on employment and economic development. And here we have decided to offer 168 million euro already last year. There is still some part of that assistance which is not being used, so we are still ready to assist even more.
Mr. Ambassador, it was a pleasure having you on my studio. Thank you for the interview.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rubikon me Adriatik Kelmendin përkrahet nga Bira Peja, Interex, Cima Construction dhe Albi Group.